All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Absolutely. Always ready to get into the nitty-gritty.
Today, we're going full throttle into the world of Formula One.
Buckle up.
We're focusing on Red Bull Racing.
Ah, Red Bull, always a hot topic.
There's been a lot of postseason chatter, especially about Sergio Checo Pérez.
Interesting.
Now, obviously, we all saw Max Verstappen dominate the 2024 season. What a year he had.
Completely untouchable, it seemed like.
But the big question is, did Red Bull make a mistake by sticking with Perez as his teammate?
Now that's a question worth exploring.
And that's exactly what a recent article from the Spanish sports publication Mundo Deportivo is diving into.
Mundo Deportivo, they always have their finger on the pulse of F1.
It sounds like Red Bull has been doing some serious soul-searching, some end-of-season analysis, and they're hinting at some tough decisions on the horizon.
I'm all ears. What are they saying?
Well, the article points to Christian Horner, Red Bull's team principal, and he's actually admitting they might have made an error by keeping Perez for the whole season.
Wow, that's a pretty big statement coming from Horner.
They're even suggesting it may have cost them a better finish in the Constructors' Championship.
Okay, so before we go any further, let's break it down for our listeners who might not be totally familiar with all the ins and outs of F1.
Right, good point.
What exactly is the Constructors' Championship, and why does it matter so much, especially for a team like Red Bull that already has a world champion driver?
Yeah, you'd think with Verstappen winning it all, they'd be over the moon. But it seems like there's more to the story.
Exactly. It's easy to get laser-focused on the Drivers' Championship, but the Constructors' Championship is a whole other beast.
Right, it's like a separate competition, right?
Absolutely. Think of it this way. The points earned by both drivers on a team throughout the entire season get added up together.
So it's all about the team's overall performance, not just one driver.
Exactly, and the team with the most points at the end of the season, well, they win the Constructors' Championship. It's a pretty big deal.
So even though Verstappen's racking up wins and bringing home the glory, if his teammate isn't pulling their weight and scoring consistently,
It can really hurt Red Bull's chances in this other championship.
it's like you need both drivers firing on all cylinders to really make a serious run at it.
Precisely. It's a true team effort. And for a top-tier team like Red Bull, the Constructors' Championship brings a lot to the table.
Yeah, like what?
Well, there's the prestige, the bragging rights, being able to say you're the best team out there.
Okay, so bragging rights, got it.
But it's also about cold, hard cash. The winning team gets a much bigger share of the prize money.
Ah, so that's why they're sweating over Perez's performance. It all makes sense now.
It all comes back to those championship points and the financial rewards that come with them.
Now, here's where things get really spicy. The article claims that Red Bull actually considered replacing Perez mid-season.
Whoa, really?
Can you imagine the pressure these drivers are under, knowing their seat could be yanked at any moment?
It's cutthroat, it's high stakes, it's Formula One.
So, spill the beans. Who are they thinking about bringing in to replace him?
Well, the name that's been floating around is none other than Daniel Ricciardo.
Oh, wow, the Honey Badger. He's a fan favorite. That would have been huge.
Right. So, quick recap. Ricciardo drove for Red Bull for quite a while.
Yeah, I remember he even won a few races with them, didn't he?
He did, but then he moved on to a different team, so bringing him back would have been a bit of a homecoming.
Okay, I can see why they'd be tempted by that, but why didn't they pull the trigger? Why stick with Perez?
Well, the article suggests that loyalty played a big part in their decision.
Loyalty, huh?
Interesting. They were hoping, or maybe even believing, that Perez would be able to turn things around.
Plus, he did have a pretty strong start to the season, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, he was on the podium in Bahrain and Jeddah, those first two races.
That must have given them some hope.
Those early podium finishes definitely would have boosted their confidence in him, but then,
Fan.
well, his performance took a nosedive. That inconsistency is probably what really frustrated Red Bull.
Yeah, the article throws out a pretty stark stat. He only scored 21 points in the last 10 races of the season.
Ouch, that's a tough pill to swallow, especially when those points are so crucial for the Constructors' Championship.
It's like they're watching potential points and potential prize money slip through their fingers.
Exactly. Even with Verstappen winning left and right, Perez not consistently scoring meant they were leaving points on the table, points that could have made a real difference in the final standings.
And to really drive the point home, the article quotes Horner saying the point gap between Verstappen and Perez was too wide.
That's pretty blunt, but it really highlights the constant pressure cooker these teams are in. Every single point matters.
It's a reminder that in Formula One, There's no room for sentimentality. It's all about performance, all about results.
Absolutely. And this situation with Perez really highlights the tension between driver loyalty and the relentless pursuit of success.
Did Red Bull prioritize loyalty over performance? And did it end up costing them?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one we'll be unpacking further in our deep dive.
Stay tuned, folks. We're just getting started.
Makes you wonder, right, about the pressure on that second Red Bull seat.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a Verstappen-shaped shadow hanging over whoever's in that other car.
You know, it's interesting. Even with some really talented drivers alongside him, they just haven't been able to consistently challenge for those top spots.
And in those crucial points for the Constructors' Championship, right?
Exactly. So is it the car? Is it the team environment? What makes it so tough for the second driver to really shine at Red Bull?
It's a good question. I mean, some people say that maybe the car is just set up perfectly for Verstappen's driving style.
And that could be putting his teammate at a disadvantage without even realizing it.
Then there's the mental game, being Verstappen's teammate. That's got to come with some serious pressure.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're constantly being compared to arguably the most talented driver on the grid right now.
It's got to be tough, especially if you're struggling to find your groove.
Yeah, it's like trying to climb Mount Everest while carrying a backpack full of rocks.
And to make things even more interesting, the article mentions how Horner actually praised Perez for being a team player.
Oh, yeah, he called him a fantastic team player, specifically for helping Verstappen secure those championship wins in previous seasons.
So it's like they value Perez, they see his contributions, but in the end,
it just wasn't enough to justify keeping him around, especially with the Constructors' Championship at stake.
it's a tough business, even if you're a valuable asset, if you're not delivering those top-tier results consistently.
You're vulnerable. That's the reality of Formula One.
And it's important to remember, we're getting this story from Red Bull's perspective through Horner's words.
Right, we don't know what was going on behind the scenes or how Perez feels about all of this.
It'd be fascinating to hear his side of the story, the pressure he was under, his reaction to being replaced.
Yeah, to get the full picture, not just the Red Bull approved version.
Okay, so we've talked about Perez, we've talked about the pressure cooker at Red Bull. Now let's talk about the new guy.
Liam Lawson, the man stepping into the hot seat.
He's replacing Perez as Verstappen's teammate for next season. And from what the article suggests, Horner's already trying to manage expectations.
Oh, really? Damage control already.
He wants to give Lawson the space to develop, to learn, without feeling overwhelmed by the pressure.
But how realistic is that, given everything we've just talked about? I mean, Lawson's a young driver joining a top team with a world champion teammate.
The spotlight's going to be on him from day one. There's no escaping that.
Absolutely. He'll need to learn fast, adapt to the team dynamics, and try to carve out his own space in that environment.
So, big picture. What are the key takeaways here? What does this whole saga tell us about the inner workings of Formula One?
Well, for me, it really underscores the importance of consistency, especially when you're aiming for both championships.
You might have one superstar driver who can win races, but for the constructors' title,
You need both drivers performing at a high level, bringing home those points week in and week out.
it's a balance between individual brilliance and teamwork, and that seems to be the ongoing challenge for Red Bull.
They have the star power with Verstappen, but finding a second driver who can thrive in that environment, that's the tricky part.
It's a baptism by fire for Lawson, that's for sure.
It'll be interesting to see how he handles it, if he can rise to the occasion, learn from Verstappen, and deliver those consistent results.
He could have a bright future in Formula One, but it's not going to be easy.
Not at all. He's got a steep learning curve ahead of him.
Before we move on, I want to go back to something you said earlier about the human element of all of this.
Oh, yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the stats, the competition, but we're talking about real people here.
These are elite athletes under immense pressure, constantly in the public eye.
It's a demanding lifestyle, mentally and emotionally.
And we've been focusing on Red Bull, but what about Perez? Where does this leave him?
That's the big question. What does the future hold for him? Will he try to prove himself elsewhere? Or could this be the end of his Formula One career?
It's a cliffhanger. We'll have to wait and see.
But it's a reminder that in Formula One, just like in life, there are always unexpected twists and turns.
Speaking of twists and turns, we haven't even touched on the financial side of things.
Oh yeah, the money, the big bucks.
We talked about driver salaries, but those contracts can get pretty complicated, right?
Oh, absolutely. There are performance bonuses, image rights, all sorts of clauses and stipulations.
So it's not just about driving fast. It's about being a brand, negotiating smart deals.
Exactly. It's a whole business side to it. And those financial considerations often play a big role in driver decisions.
It's like fantasy F1, but with millions of dollars on the line.
That's a great way to put it. Teams are always juggling talent, performance, and budget constraints.
It's a high-wire act, that's for sure. This deep dive has really been eye-opening. It's amazing how much goes on behind the scenes in Formula One.
It's not just about the races. It's a whole ecosystem of strategy, teamwork, finances, even psychology.
It's a sport that demands excellence in every aspect,
Yeah.
and that's what makes it so captivating.
Well said, well said.
You know, it's crazy to think that even someone like Perez, with all his experience and wins, can still find themselves on the outs.
Yeah, it really goes to show you how quickly things can change in Formula One. You got to be at the top of your game all the time.
No room for error.
Nope. Every decision matters. Every point counts, especially when it comes to driver choices.
It's like one wrong move, and it could trigger a whole chain reaction that shakes up the entire sport.
It's wild, and we haven't even touched on the money side of things.
Oh yeah, the contracts, the negotiations, it's a whole other world.
Right. We talked about driver salaries, but those things can be incredibly complex.
What do you mean? Like, what kind of stuff is in those contracts?
Oh man, you got performance bonuses, image rights, all sorts of clauses and stipulations. It can get pretty intense.
So you're not just racing other drivers, you're also playing a business game.
Exactly. It's all part of the package. Being a Formula One driver means managing your brand, negotiating smart deals. It's not just about what happens on the track.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to all the different layers of Formula One.
It's so much more than just fast cars and exciting races.
It's a world of strategy, teamwork, finances, even psychology. It's mind-blowing.
And that's what makes it so captivating. You never know what's going to happen next.
Well said.
Yeah.
So we've spent a lot of time talking about Red Bull, but they're just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Oh, yeah. There are so many other teams out there, each with their own unique story, their own challenges.
So how do they approach these same issues? Choosing drivers, dealing with performance, managing those crazy finances?
That's a great question, and it's something to think about. Every team has to find their own path to success.
It's like a never-ending quest for victory, always pushing the limits, always trying to outsmart the competition.
And we'll be here to break it all down, to dig deep and uncover the stories behind the headlines.
So to everyone listening, keep your engines revving, your curiosity fueled, and join us next time for another deep dive into the world of Formula One.
Until then, keep those tires warm.
Thanks for joining us.